Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today, normally I would be having a haul video. I've been trying to do those every 2 weeks, and today's the slot for the next batch of juicy back issues. But though I do have some of those already recorded and on the way, today I'm going to be doing something just a little bit different because this weekend I'm very excited to be attending a virtual convention. It's Arisia, the annual science fiction convention here in Boston. Of course, this year is going to be virtual. This is my sixth Arisia, so I'm curious to see how the virtual convention space ends up being, what that's like. Um, and I'm also really excited because this year I'm going to be a panelist for the first time. That panel is about Wonder Woman. It's the 80th anniversary of Wonder Woman this year, and so we're doing a panel on Monday morning about that. And all of this got me thinking two things. First of all, if you're interested in having a fun long weekend at a science fiction convention, because of the fact it's virtual, the great thing is you don't have to be here in Boston this year. You can view it from anywhere. I think there's a $25 ticket fee that will give you access to everything through the whole weekend. But the other thing is, I thought this would be a cool time to look at comics that take place at conventions. Now, the first comic book convention was in 1964 in New York City, and by the late 60s, it started to catch on. Really, the early 70s, there was an explosion of comic conventions. And you start to see these conventions being referenced in the comics themselves by the mid-late 70s. Iron Man 72 is one of the first ones that I know of where there's a scene that takes place at a comic book convention. But lots of companies would slip stories in. Marvel did a lot of them. There's an issue of Kazar that has some part of the story takes place at a comic book convention. Starbrand number 12. Famous for the 12 of us that were reading the New Universe famous issue that takes place at a comic book convention. But the company that really seemed to really get into it the most is Archie Comics, and they have tons of stories and covers starting mainly in the 80s but into the 90s that take place at comic book conventions. And so I thought I'd show a couple highlights here. Some of their stories, they actually issues, they're just cover gags. You know, Archie sometimes has these gag one gag covers, and the stories inside don't actually correspond with those. So there's a number of convention covers. There's actually one specific joke I'll show you in a minute that they used on no fewer than 3 different covers. But sometimes the stories inside are also about conventions, and that's the case here with Life with Archie number 50. Which says, "Welcome to the Riverdale Comic Con 1985." And we got Archie and Jughead and Dilton, and it says, "Archie runs into villains galore in the great comic robbery." So just as you might think, it's about, someone trying to steal comics at the convention. There's a couple cool Easter eggs here on the cover. You can see there's an advertisement for Pep number 400 in the background. Big anniversary issue. Of course, Pep was canceled shortly after that. I think 411 was the last issue. Whenever they do these covers, they of course always have the people are buying back issues of old Archie comics. There's a couple old issues of Pep being purchased here in the background, and we're going to see Pep on a lot of these. I'm a huge fan of Life with Archie, but I really dig this one in particular. And then here we are. It's Archie Giant Series Magazine, number 601. Now, this is really cool. It takes place at the 20th annual San Diego Comic-Con. It's dated 1989. And there's a couple cool things. Over here is Don and Maggie Thompson, who published the Comics Buyer's Guide. You also get, again, here's Chuck, and he's buying an issue of Pep. Unusual. It's an Archie comic, but they have a Marvel character on the cover. They have a cosplayer dressed as Valkyrie. This basic joke here. So Chuck is looking at a comic and says, "Archie, I've got a real collector's item on my hands." Or I've got my hands on a real collector's item. And Archie is saying, "So have I, Chuck." This joke is on 2 other covers besides this one. So it's on 3 covers altogether. And the other ones, they have the cosplayers wearing very like generic outfits, but here they decided to have her actually dressed as Valkyrie. So I think that's cool. Now remember, please, uh, as you should know, and as all the convention signs say, cosplay is not consent. So Archie's being a real creep on all of these. It is the 80s. That's really no excuse, but it's really neat to have this 20th annual San Diego Comic-Con cover. And then finally, I wanted to show this one. This is probably my favorite. This is at San Diego Comic-Con 1991. And they go to the convention, and this is celebrating the 50th anniversary of Archie. But in the Archie universe, there's a fictional version of the Archie characters called Wendell and his girls Brenda and Kobina. Right? And instead of being by Bob Montana, it's by Bob Idaho. And you have Betty is reading the spin-off series Brenda and Me, which of course is a reference to Betty and Me. And Archie's saying, in real life, a dweeb like that could never rate those dolls. And Veronica's saying, it happens, Archie. It happens. It says special collector's editions. Archie visits the Comic-Cons in San Diego, New York, and Chicago. So yeah, as it says there in the cover, he goes to 3 conventions. And just like they have Don and Maggie Thompson on the cover, the other one, on the inside here, they work in actual people in the comic book community into the stories as for cameos. So again, these are just a few of these. There's like Life with Archie, like 285, I think, is another convention story, although it doesn't have a convention cover. There's 2 or 3 others that have covers but not internal stories. And Chuck is in a lot of these because originally Chuck didn't really have any defining character traits other than he was the black character. And eventually they decided, well, we should probably give him an actual personality of some kind. And what they settled on at some point in the late 80s was that Chuck is actually a really good artist, and he's really into drawing, and he wants to be a comic book artist. And so comic books are Chuck's sort of thing in the same way that eating hamburgers is Jughead's. And so Chuck appears in a lot of these. In the Life with Archie Married Life series that shows them as adults 5 years after they graduate from high school, he and his wife Nancy are both into comics. She's writing the comics and he's drawing them, and there's like some tension there. They both end up getting individual deals from different publishers, and they don't tell the other one because they don't want the other person to feel bad. It's blah blah blah. So Chuck's on a lot of these, but anyway, that's it. I just wanted to show off some of these really cool. I think it's a really neat niche. It would be. I haven't tracked down some of the non-Archie ones that are at comic conventions, but I think it would be a really fun, cool sort of sub collection to put together at some point. And another just cool thing I want to note is that Pep Comics had already been canceled at this point, but Archie Giant Series magazine was one that had sort of a rotating stable of titles. So they'd have like a Jughead special, an Archie special, the Christmas specials, those are on this banner. So when Pep got canceled, they actually continued to publish occasional issues of Pep, but with the Archie Giant Series magazine banner and numbering. So even though I got rid of my Pep collection, I kept these because they're so kind of weird oddities. Maybe in a future video, if you're interested, I'll show you the strangest issue of Pep in Archie Giant Series magazine, which is a great story where Archie and the gang drive to the Archie Comics headquarters and interact with their own creators. And if I remember correctly, the Archie characters in real life are so annoying that the Archie creators end up throwing them out of the building because they're just obnoxious teenagers. So anyway, that's the story for a different time though. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. If you're interested in joining the festivities at Arisia, I'm going to have all the information down below so you can go find out how to sign up, catch the panels. Again, my Wonder Woman panel, if you're interested in that, is going to be on Monday morning, I think at 11:30, but if you go to the Arisia site and check the convention schedule, it'll have all the information there. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next time.